Hi! As some of you may be aware, November is Solo Gaming Appreciation Month. So this time I'm going to talk about solo gaming, that is, playing tabletop role-playing games with just one player, no game master. And many things that I'm going to mention will apply to some degree when it comes to cooperative style of gaming where you have two or perhaps more player characters and no game master. Well, first let's talk about the solo experience. Solo gaming is quite different from a group experience when playing role-playing games. You simply cannot replace the experience of playing with other people. So do not get into solo or solitaire role-playing games without taking that into consideration. There's simply no way to replace that experience, and at the same time, don't play multiplayer role-playing games expecting to have just an experience where just one mind colors the entire game with his or her imagination. It's a cooperative effort. So solo gaming is all about playing the system and imagining the setting by yourself. It's quite similar to reading a book, except that you are the author. It seems almost like a shamanic experience of sorts, because you are imagining this world and inhabiting these different characters. Especially if you play with more than one player character, you're going to have to identify yourself with the character. So it feels like a sort of like a traveling to this dimension created by your imagination, but without the input of others. In my other videos, I've talked about that there are so many resources nowadays to play with other people. So even if you don't have people in your community that want to play role-playing games, you can play via the internet using Google Hangouts, Skype, Roll20, or you could play by forum or by email. There are so many ways that you can play with other people. However, let's explore the reasons as to why some people enjoy solo gaming. Well, there are a few practical reasons. First, solo gaming, it's a great way to test new role-playing game systems and modules. Maybe you just purchased a new role-playing game or this adventure campaign, and you're not exactly sure if you are capable of running such a, perhaps it's a very crunchy system, or maybe it's a storytelling system with some unusual details, or maybe it's a campaign or an adventure that you're not exactly sure if it has been properly tuned or tested, and you want to see if some issues come up, or maybe it's a very difficult scenario, or there are so many encounters with unexpected things. You could use solo gaming to test those systems or those adventures, so that once you get to run the adventure for your group, you will have no trouble at all. You could also play solo RPGs because you don't like playing digitally. Maybe you don't have a good time schedule and you can't play via Skype or Google Hangouts, but maybe you also do not like to play by forum or by email because you want to use miniatures and battle maps, that is physical items, and you don't like using digital maps and counters. So maybe that's the reason why you engage into solo role-playing games. Maybe there aren't people in your group interested in playing a particular system. Maybe your group is all about fantasy or all about horror. They don't enjoy steampunk or maybe cyberpunk or Wild West type of games. And maybe you search online and there are no people interested in playing those types of games. That would be another excuse to play those types of role-playing games. That is, those systems that people have no interest in playing, or maybe it's an adventure that you really want to run and there are no people interested in playing that adventure. Another reason could be that you simply enjoy the solo experience. Even if you have your own group and you're running adventures, you simply like that almost like a meditative style of gameplay where you're playing by yourself. It kind of feels like when you were very little and you used to play with your action figures or whatever. But at the same time, it has that sophistication to the point that it also feels a bit like staged act or play. Now I'm going to give you some resources that will facilitate your enjoyment of playing solo RPGs. I'm going to put all the relevant links in the description below. First, let's talk about what I would consider the best solo systems. There are probably many others out there, and I played other solo systems, but I found them quite flawed. There is a particular one, I don't remember the name, but I remember that it was incredibly repetitive, boring, and your character got too strong in just a couple of adventures, and it was a bit messy. But this time I'm going to give you the best solo RPGs in my opinion. And if you have other systems that think are pretty good for solo gaming, write them down in a comment below, please, so that we can benefit from those games. Well, my first system was probably one of the best fantasy solo systems that I've played. It is Scarlet Heroes. I'm going to put, as I was telling you, a link to my review below. And the Scarlet Heroes offers quite exotic, dangerous, somewhat catastrophic, and exciting fantasy experience. It's a variation of Dungeons and Dragons of old school D&D, but your characters are quite powerful. That is, you can play the game with just a single player character, and it's going to be quite easy to tackle any sort of adventure with your character. And at the end of the book, you have a superb adventure generator. You have a system of tags to create the world and different adventure sites, and everything is just very well customized for solo gaming. This is one of the best systems out there, in my opinion. Then we have Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls is probably the first fantasy role-playing game. Well, that is the first edition of Tunnels and Trolls that presented an effective and engaging solo experience when it comes to tabletop role-playing games. Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls does not have a random adventure, random scenario, or world-generating system. You have to either download free adventures or purchase solo adventures to enjoy it as a solo experience. So that could be considered a bit of a disadvantage. However, there are just a ton of adventures, and pretty much all of them have a lot of replayability. So I don't think you will run out of adventures anytime soon, and I know that a lot of fans are always bringing out their own adventures for free or incredibly cheap, just a few dollars. And then you have Mutant Epoch. And Mutant Epoch, if you don't like fantasy, this Mutant Epoch is a game about post-apocalyptic mutant adventures. The only, what I would consider a slight disadvantage to the Mutant Epoch, but it depends on the player. For me, it's a pretty cool feature, but it's that you need more than one player character. You usually need between 6 or 10 player characters, or maybe even 12, depending on the character generating system that you are using. And it's all about mutant powers, gore, post-apocalyptic situations, using machine guns and ancient power armor. It's a great game, playing it cooperatively or as a solo experience. In fact, this is a game that is quite friendly when you want to play with other people, but you don't want to have a referee or game master. You can play it with everybody as player characters. So that's pretty cool. Now, I'm going to give you some tools that you can use to play other role-playing games as solo games, because maybe you like Pathfinder or Symbaroum or any game that you can think of, Shadowrun. So I'm going to give you a few tools to use to convert those games into solo experiences. Oh, and before that, in the Troll scene, the free magazine for Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls, I don't remember if it's magazine 1 or 2, there's a few paragraphs explaining how to use Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls solo adventures with any type of fantasy system, that is 13th Age, Dungeons and Dragons, pretty much any edition, etc. So keep that in mind. Well, generic tools to convert any role-playing game system into a solo system. First, we have the Mythic Game Master Emulator, probably the best emulator out there currently. Some people find it a bit troublesome to use its system of logic and chaos and basically common sense, but I think it's the best emulator out there, and it works with pretty much any type of role-playing game. It's a great, like an artificial intelligence that steps in for the game master, and it's also a great way to play a game with only player characters and no game master. It's quite effective. It runs quite smooth. You just need to apply a bit of common sense and try to piece together the different random elements that come out depending on the chaos factor, etc., and encounters. You could also play any type of game using different dungeon generators. So for example, you have Schweig's theme dungeon generator. I did a review for it yesterday. I'm going to put a link in the description below. And you also have the Tome of Adventure Design and the this user, Grand Arcane Wizard, I think that was his name. He also commented that he enjoyed the Tome of Adventure Design. So the Grand Arcane Wizard approves that you use this tome. I've been using the Tome of Adventure Design and the Ultimate Toolbox with many games, and you can easily take any of the results that you generate, if it's something related to a dungeon or to the world, some map feature, and change it depending on the genre and story of your game. I think that the Tome of Adventure Design is great for generating dungeon adventure sites, but I found the Ultimate Toolbox to be better at generating details about the world, cities, towns, geography, etc. Now, there are some considerations when it comes to solo gaming. First, some players could experience a bit of a difficulty handling multiple player characters. Maybe you're playing a system that is all about teamwork, because there are some games that are, for example, Scarlet Heroes, but that is obviously a setting that works great solo, where a single hero can tackle pretty much any adventure. But there are some games that are highly dependent on the combination of different skills and abilities, and some players could think, that's very difficult for me to handle several character sheets at the same time. But it's possible, it's doable. I've done it. And I actually think it's a good workout for your mind, because at first you're going to, for example, if you're using 4 player characters, you could be like, oh no, battle starts and you're like, with this character I'm going to use Fireball, and with this one I'm going to use Cliff by killing this other guy, and with this other I'm going to do a Bull Rush. So you could get a bit like tangled up. But after a few sessions, I actually found that I memorized a lot of the different abilities and spells, and I think that's good food for your for your brain, for your memory, and I think that actually will probably make you become smarter. And so it's not that difficult, and suddenly you're running things quite smoothly. Although I never used it with a game with that you hire henchmen and such. Maybe with hirelings it's a bit more troublesome, but nobody's rushing you. You could have all the sheets spread out on the table, or if you're using a computer, have different windows open with different stats and abilities, etc. So it's doable. It's not as hard as it first appears. Now, there's also a consideration that maybe you see that some systems are more comfortable for solo gaming, even though they are designed to be played with other people. Especially those games, for example, like Simbarum, that the players roll the dice and the game master is just like the storyteller, or for example, like Numenera. In those games, I think they could be easier to use with, for example, the Mythic Game Master Emulator, just controlling one player character. And I'm going to take this opportunity to advertise Demon Marked. I actually collaborated with the games designer about a year ago, more or less, with the expansion. And I think this game works quite well as a solo experience. It's on a pay-what-you-want basis. So if you want to try it, you could basically set the price to 0 in Drivethrurpg, and you could download it for free. And another challenge when running solo role-playing games could be that maybe you like a module or a campaign or something that your players are, as I was telling you, are not interested in playing, and maybe you could use the Mythic Game Master emulator to add some randomness to that particular encounter, adventure, etc. Because sometimes it becomes too predictable. Maybe you have the journey into the castle, who knows what, and you already know where the traps are and the treasure and the enemies, and maybe there are two options. You could play it as it is, and you will only be challenged by the different combat encounters and by the way you use the different character skills. But maybe you could use Mythic or some other type of generator or system to randomize the contents of the rooms, and that way you would still get surprised. Or you could even modify the story, perhaps, if you don't like the plot line of the module, etc. There are also a few challenges when running solo games, because some people like role-playing games because of the experience of coming together with friends and enjoying a good time, and simply cannot get into the groove of the solo experience. But as I was telling you, it's a completely different type of RPG experience. You cannot approach it as a group experience. It's more like reading a book, or almost kind of like daydreaming. But at the same time, it could work faster and more smooth because you're the one calling the shots for everything. So in general, solo gaming shouldn't be dismissed because it has its own enjoyment. Don't be so quick as to reject it, that, oh, I don't have a group, I'm not going to enjoy it. As I was telling you, there are different benefits for running different solo games, modules on your own, or generating completely new adventures with the different systems that I mentioned. So I would recommend that you try solo gaming in this November to celebrate the Solo Gaming Appreciation Month. And well, thanks for watching this video. If you have any comments or questions, positive or negative experiences when playing solo RPGs, or if you have more recommendations and tools that the players can use to have a positive solo RPG experience, be sure to write them down in the comments below. See you later.